The whistle screamed through the desert before the sun reached the horizon. Steam rolled across the lonely platform as the Friday train slowed into Dry Creek, its iron wheels grinding against the rails. Long before the locomotive stopped, one figure already stood waiting at the platform's edge. He had been there before dawn. The old man's boots never shifted. His weathered coat fluttered in the morning wind, and one gloved hand rested lightly on a polished walking cane. In the other, hidden inside his pocket, a silver watch ticked with quiet certainty. The train stopped, doors swung open. Passengers stepped down into the cool desert air, ranch hands, merchants, mothers carrying sleepy children, soldiers bound for distant forts, and travelers who had never seen Dry Creek before. The old man looked at every face, not quickly, not carelessly. He searched each stranger as though one heartbeat might change his entire life. Then the last passenger climbed down. His eyes lingered. Hope flickered. The young traveler smiled politely before walking past. The hope disappeared. The conductor called for boarding. The whistle blew again. Steel wheels began to turn. The old man remained perfectly still until the final railcar vanished into the endless stretch of red desert. Only then did he remove his pocket watch, study it for a long moment, close it with a soft click, and quietly leave the platform. No one stopped him. No one ever did. By breakfast, the town was already talking. Inside the creaking saloon, old ranchers lowered their voices when his name nearly came up. Outside the general store, children watched him disappear down the dusty street before their mothers gently called them away. Even the blacksmith paused his hammer for a moment as the old man passed. It had been that way for years. Some folks claimed he had once been rich before losing everything. Others believed he had buried his family somewhere beyond the mesas. A few whispered that grief had stolen his mind. Yet every rumor ended the same way. No one knew, no one asked, because every Friday belonged to him. The railroad station itself seemed to understand. Its faded sign creaked beneath the desert wind. Telegraph wires hummed overhead like distant voices. Dust drifted across empty tracks where only echoes remained Friday after Friday. Summer gave way to winter. Winter returned to spring. Children became grown men. Young brides became grandmothers. Storefronts changed. Sheriffs came and went. The station master retired. Still the old man arrived before sunrise. Still he searched every face. Still he left alone. Then one autumn morning everything changed. A new station clerk arrived from St. Louis. His name was Samuel Reed. His vest was still neatly pressed. His boots still carried Eastern polish, and curiosity lived in his eyes more strongly than caution. Before sunrise on his first Friday, Samuel unlocked the station door and immediately noticed the old man already standing outside. "Does he always come this early?" he quietly asked the porter. The porter barely glanced toward the platform. "Earlier. He boards the train." "No," Samuel frowned. "Then who's he meeting?" The porter lifted a heavy crate without answering. By noon, Samuel had asked 3 more railroad workers. Each gave the same response. A slow shake of the head, no explanation, no story, only silence. The mystery followed him all day. When the next Friday arrived, Samuel found himself watching the platform instead of his paperwork. Again the old man searched every face. Again no one came. Again the train disappeared into the western desert. The platform emptied. Only wind remained. The old man reached for his pocket watch before turning away. Samuel stepped outside. His boots echoed against the weathered boards. "Sir." The old man stopped walking. He did not turn. Samuel suddenly understood why no one asked. The silence itself seemed sacred, but curiosity pushed him one step closer. "I hope you don't mind me asking." The old man's shoulders remained perfectly still. Samuel swallowed. "Who are you waiting for?" The wind died. Even the telegraph wires fell silent. Several townsfolk looked toward the platform from across the street, sensing something they had never witnessed before. For what felt like an eternity, the old man said nothing. Then he slowly turned. His tired eyes held neither anger nor annoyance. Only years. When he finally spoke, his voice was so soft that Samuel almost missed it. "My son." The words hung in the desert air like the last note of a forgotten hymn. Nothing else needed to be said. Yet somehow, everything had changed. The words settled over the platform long after the wind had stopped. Samuel Reed remained where he stood, afraid that even the sound of his breathing might break whatever had finally been spoken. The old man looked down the tracks stretching toward the distant mesas. His name was Jacob. A faint smile touched the corners of his mouth before disappearing again. When he was 5, he'd chase every train that came through Dry Creek. He'd wave at the engineers until the last car vanished around the bend. He let out a quiet breath, said one day he'd be the one blowing the whistle. Samuel listened without interrupting. The old man reached into his coat and opened the silver pocket watch. Inside the lid rested a tiny, faded photograph of a young boy wearing an oversized conductor's cap. His mother made that cap from an old piece of canvas, the old man said. He wore it every day until it fell apart. He closed the watch with a gentle click. When Jacob turned 19, the railroad offered him a place at a training school farther west. The station seemed smaller as the silence settled around them. The morning he left, Elias paused, his eyes following the rails into the shimmering distance. He hugged me harder than he ever had before. Samuel could almost hear the memory. He laughed and said, "Don't you worry, Pa, every Friday I'll come home, even if it's only for supper." The old man's voice softened. I told him I'd be right here waiting. Another gust of wind carried dust across the empty platform. He leaned out the train window until I couldn't see him anymore. The old man stopped speaking. For several moments only the telegraph wires hummed above them. Samuel finally asked, "What happened?" Elias never looked away from the tracks. Black Raven Canyon. Name alone seemed to darken the morning. Train never reached the next station. Samuel's face tightened. They said a mountainside gave way after heavy rain. Tons of rock buried the rails. Elias swallowed once. By the time rescue crews arrived, the canyon had already swallowed everything. His grip tightened around the cane. They found shattered timber, they found twisted iron, they found luggage scattered for miles. His voice became almost a whisper. They never found Jacob. Samuel lowered his eyes. "I'm sorry." So was everyone else. The old man nodded slowly. Sheriff came. The preacher came. My neighbors came. They all told me the same thing. He gave a tired smile. "It's time to let him rest." Elias shook his head. "How could I?" He looked directly at Samuel for the first time. "A father doesn't stop waiting because someone else has stopped believing." The words settled deep inside the young clerk. "So every Friday," Elias continued, "I return to this platform. Every single one, every single one." "How long?" The old man looked at his watch once more. 20 years. Samuel struggled to find words. "You never missed one. Not even when the fever nearly took me. During the blizzards. During the drought." His eyes returned to the rails. "If my boy kept his promise." A quiet pause followed. "I wanted him to find me keeping mine." Neither man noticed the 4 travelers sitting inside the station waiting room. Their hats shaded their faces. Coffee sat untouched on the table between them. The oldest slowly raised his head. A pale scar crossed his cheek from ear to jaw. He had not moved since Elias began speaking. Now his expression hardened. One of the younger men leaned closer. "You know him?" The scarred man continued, staring through the dusty window. "I know exactly who he is." "The old fool." The scarred man gave him a cold look. "Watch your mouth." Younger outlaw blinked. "Why?" The older man's jaw tightened. "Because that isn't just an old man." His hand drifted beneath his coat. "I watched him hunt men across 3 territories." Silence filled the room. Younger outlaw whispered, "Who?" The scarred man answered without taking his eyes off the platform. "Marshal Elias Carter." Name landed like a gunshot. The youngest outlaw turned pale. "I thought he disappeared years ago." "So did I." The scarred man's fingers slowly wrapped around the grip of his revolver. "But legends don't disappear. They wait." Outside, Elias quietly closed his pocket watch. Inside, 4 men silently prepared to make sure the old marshal would never see another Friday. "Stay where you are." Voice cut through the station yard like the crack of dry timber. Samuel turned first. 4 men stepped out of the waiting room with revolvers already drawn. Their boots spread across the platform, closing every path to the street. The scarred leader stood in front. His eyes never left Elias. "So," he said, "you've grown old after all." Elias slowly faced him. "So have you, Silas." The outlaw's smile faded. "You still remember my name." "I remember every man who mistook greed for courage." Other outlaws laughed, but Silas did not. He studied the old marshal with careful eyes, gray hair, bent shoulders, a walking cane, 20 years of waiting. "You don't look much like the law anymore," Silas sneered. I'm not here as the law. No, I'm here as a father. Silas gave a mocking chuckle. A father waiting for a ghost. Insult echoed across the platform. Several townspeople stopped where they stood. No one reached for a weapon. Everyone knew trouble had arrived. Samuel stepped forward. You don't have to do this. One outlaw shoved him backward. Stay out of it, clerk. Samuel stumbled against a freight crate, powerless to help. Silas lifted his revolver. You hunted my gang for 3 years. You nearly put a rope around my neck. Waited a long time to return the favor. Elias remained perfectly still. I stopped hunting long ago. Silas laughed. I didn't. His revolver fired. The shot splintered the wooden post where Elias had been standing a heartbeat earlier. Gasps spread across the station. The old man's cane struck the platform, not because he had fallen, because he no longer needed it. His back straightened. The weary bend disappeared. His eyes sharpened with the calm certainty of someone who had survived far worse than fear. Samuel stared in disbelief. The harmless old man was gone. Marshal Elias Carter stood in his place. The second outlaw rushed forward. Elias moved only one step. His revolver cleared its holster with quiet precision. One shot. The outlaw's weapon flew from his hand, spinning into the dust. A cry escaped the man's lips as he clutched his numbed fingers. Not a fatal wound, a warning. The third outlaw fired wildly. Bullets shattered the freight crate. Elias slipped behind a baggage cart, using its heavy iron frame as cover. He waited, counted, listened. The instant the gunfire stopped, he leaned out. Another single shot. The outlaw's hat spun into the air while his revolver crashed onto the tracks. His knees locked in place. He never fired again. Silas's expression darkened. You always did enjoy showing off. Elias lowered his revolver only slightly. No. I always preferred giving a man one last chance. The youngest outlaw ignored the warning. He charged with a shout. Elias stepped aside at the final instant, caught the man's wrist, twisted, and sent the revolver sliding beneath the station steps. The young outlaw hit the ground hard, staring upward in shock. 3 men disarmed, not one dead. Samuel could hardly believe what he had witnessed. The stories had not been exaggerated, if anything. They had been too small. Silas slowly backed toward the water tower, keeping his revolver fixed on Elias. Still got steady hands. They've had plenty of practice. Silas's smile returned, colder than before. But you're still waiting. Elias said nothing. You still think your boy died in Black Raven Canyon. The old marshal's eyes narrowed. Silas chuckled. We robbed that payroll train. I know. You don't know everything. Wind carried dust between them. Silas leaned forward. Your son climbed out alive. The words struck harder than any bullet. Samuel looked at Elias for the first time since he had met him. The old marshal's steady breathing faltered. Silas saw it. He smiled wider. We kept the survivors quiet. He slowly tightened his finger on the trigger. Some escaped. His voice became almost a whisper, and Jacob Carter was one of them. Hope returned to Elias' eyes. After 20 years of grief, one sentence had given him a reason to believe again.